Now let's move to the lower portion, so from our waist down to the hemline. Starting at our seam, short strokes downward. Next, define the edges around our finger and hand. And then the left side going from our seam at the waist down toward the hem. Let's fill in the right side of our sketch under the fingers from a top to bottom motion. And then under all of our fingers, we just want to show where the fabric is and that the hand is on top of our fabric. Let's continue in a top to bottom motion, filling in a tiny bit more. We are going to have 2 light sources for this sketch. One light source is for the top half of the body. The other light source is the bottom half of the body. So fill in on the right side, top to bottom motion, so that we have a shadow. And then you're going to start filling in on the left side as well in the same manner. But we are going to leave a little bit of space toward the center of the skirt portion of our sketch. Now let's move down and from bottom to top, nice smooth strokes. On the far left side, we are going to start at our hem. Now you're going to skip a tiny space here and fill in the triangle shape from bottom to top. See, that little tiny bit of white space is helpful in creating the 3-dimensional effect. As you move across your hem, each time you have a triangular shape, you're going to leave a tiny little bit of white space so that you can see that triangular shape even more. Make sure you define those edges and continue to go from bottom to top. More pressure at the bottom, less pressure at the top. And then skip a little space because there's another triangular shape there. And just the tip of your brush is what you use to define those edges. Bottom to top, and you're on the right side of the sketch now. Define that edge very nicely with the point of your pen. Now we're going to extend these lines upward a bit further. Still going from bottom to top, more pressure at the bottom of our pen, and as we move upward, we lighten up on the pressure of our pen. So going ahead and elongate these strokes now, but we're still not filling it in entirely. We do want to have some tiny bits of white space here and there, especially around those triangular shapes. When you're at the hand, you're going from the top to the bottom. And remember not to cover it completely. Now we've indicated a light source on the bottom half of our croquis as well as on the top half. That's why we have 2 separate white space areas toward the center of our sketch. This is what helps to make it become an advanced sketch. Now we're simply going to add some dots on our shadow side on the left. So right at that far left side, going ahead and put many, many, many dots so that we can start to represent the sequin in our shadow areas. Do the same on the right side and at our waist seam. And then bring those dots down toward the hem. So all of those spaces where we have created a depth and the shadow on the left, right, and bottom edges of our piece, as well as underneath that waist seam, those are the spaces where we are going to add our dots that represent the sequin. Now, get ready because this is going to be a process that you repeat many, many times. For now, though, add all of those sequin dots in those shadowy places that we've just talked about. That's underneath the waist seam on the left, the right, and down by the hem. Then we can switch over to the fine point side of our pin and add more dots that represent our sequin in those same shadowy areas. The different size dots are going to help to translate into a beautiful sequin fabric. So go on ahead and add dots, and now you can bring them into the light space. That's where we haven't touched at all, so that now we can start to see those tiny, small, fine sequins in our lighter spaces. So continue on. I'm going to speed up the process here, but add lots and lots and lots of sequin dots. Remembering to keep them mostly in the areas where we've already colored our shadowy darker tones, and then gently and lightly bring those dots into the lighter areas where we know that we have our light source focused on our sketch. As you bring those dots toward the center where we have not colored, keep them very, very fine. Barely touch the page with the fine tip of your marker. Then you can press harder in those darker areas that we've already colored on the left, right, at the hem, and by our waist. Carry those dots upward to the upper portion of the body, starting to fill in the same way in the shadowy areas first, and then very gently bring those dots to the center. Now we're moving on to marker number 2. And literally we're going to repeat this process. So pushing harder in the shadowy areas with marker number 2, we're adding larger sequin. This is the brush tip side of our marker. And we're starting to define our edges. Just the tiniest bit of pressure is all you need. We don't want to overpower the sketch. So define that neckline, shoulder, and armhole area very gently with the point of your brush tip. Then add dotted sequin and start in that shadowy dark area, and then gently, with less pressure, add it to the lighter area. Now we're going to define the right side of our sketch. Again, only use the brush tip point. Once you define that edge, add some dots, but barely press, because this is a light source area over here. So have very light pressure so that even though it's the brush tip side, these dots are going to be very faint. We want that juxtaposition of bigger and smaller and medium size sequin. It will all translate to one beautiful fabric. You might want to put on a pot of coffee or tea and get ready, because remember we have 4 colors. The lightest purple all the way to the darkest. And then we're adding in a brown on top of that to darken those outer edges. And on top of that, we're adding in a black on the very, very outermost edge. So repeat this process for each marker. I'll speed up the video at this point. So I'm going to summarize. We are adding all 4 shades of our purple, starting from the lightest to the darkest purple. And we are on our neckline, shoulder, our armhole, and then we're adding it to our side seams and underneath the bust. Then we're adding these darker tones at the waist, on the left side of the skirt portion, on the right side of the skirt portion, underneath the hand. And for that hem, we are adding these colors from the bottom going upward. So you simply repeat this process for all 4 markers. When you're adding your dots that represent the sequin, you want to make sure that in the darker areas, you push a little harder so that the sequin can appear a little bit stronger because it's a shadow. It's harder to see. Then as you're toward the center where it's lighter, that's where you press very, very light pressure so that you can have the tiniest dot. And that very tiny dot in those lighter areas is going to translate beautifully into a wonderful sequin fabric. So now I'm going to get ready to show you what it looks like when you are adding your white paint. That's only after you're done adding your purple tones, and remember we have 4 shades of purple. So once you've finished your 4 shades of purple tones and you have larger dots and you have tiny smaller dots, the larger ones are in the shadows. The tinier ones are toward the center where that light is reflecting. Then you're going to grab the tiniest brush you have, maybe a 000. Grab your acrylic white paint and start adding teeny tiny little dots. And then you want to add some larger dots in those shadowy areas. And that variety of sizes is going to look like sequin fabric with light bouncing off of it. That reflective light quality is really shown up because we have marker, which is a little bit more dull, and we're adding that white acrylic paint right on top of it, which will give a very nice sharp contrast. It's going to take a while, so go on ahead, get comfortable, and have at it. Remember, the tiniest little dot is really, really effective when it's seen next to the larger dots. So all of those varieties of shapes are what help to make light look like it's reflecting off of our sequin fabric for this dress. Get ready because we're going to use the gel pen next. Now that our paint is on and we have let it dry, we can add reflective light to each little sequin. So the concept here is that we're going to do 3 or 4 different lines. So we're just going to pick a sequin and we are going to draw a line that goes upward. So from the sequin at the top, we go upward, and then we might go left and then right. That would be 3. Maybe we'd go left, right, and then 1 downward, and they're all different lengths, but the key is to start at the sequin itself in the center. So from the sequin, if you're going upward, you start at the sequin and go up. Then you go back to the center of your dot and you go left. Then you go back to the center of that sequin dot and you go downward. That is what makes it look like light reflecting off of your sequin. It's best to have these at the outer edges of your sketches mostly. And literally, they're just straight lines. They're all different lengths, but it makes it seem like light is reflecting off of the sequin because the lines are coming from the dot itself. Those dots itself represent a sequin, and our lines going upward and to the left and to the right make it seem like the light is bouncing off. Go on ahead, add several of these lines to the outer edges of your sketch mostly. You can also add a few dots as well with this gel pen. That'll create even more depth. I'll speed up the video here as well so that we can get on to the next part. That's going to be the brown and the black for the very outer edges, adding the most depth and contrast. So that's what's next, so get ready for it. Okay, here we are with our dark umber color, and we are using the fine point side and adding dots in our shadowy areas on the outer edges. So we also will be adding these dots on the left and right sides at our triangular areas of the hem. As you fill in these dots in the shadowy areas with our brown, don't worry. If you think you've lost some of your white, you can go back in with your acrylic white paint. Feel free to darken these outer edges of our sketch as much as you like. This is really a preference, and there's no wrong way to do it. Just keep those darks on the outer edges. Now, let's move on to the black. All right, so we are on that dark side here on our left, and we're just defining. Now remember, this is a preference. You can choose to do this as dark or as light as you want. I'm going to go on ahead and go down the side of the skirt on my left, and then I'm adding dots next to the line to soften it. And you can see how that really makes it seem like there's a shadow on that left side. So this black is more powerful than the purple, of course, and more powerful and more contrast is offered than was with the brown. So be light with it. Try not to go heavy because you can always add more, but once you have too much of the black, you might not be able to pull it back. So this is a preference. Go on ahead, have at it. Now for the final touch, we'll just use a fine point black pen, and we'll add a few more dots and pull out a few more darks, And that will be it. Here are the final results. So you can really see that you're able to create lots of darks, lots of lights. If you feel like you've lost anything and you've covered over too much of your garment, then you can go on ahead and add a little bit more white paint. Even at your hemline on those diagonal lines, if you feel like you've covered too many of those up. That's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.